As if from a great distance the wind howled at them. Hidden voices filled with an unquenchable thirst for living things, filled with a hunger for pain, filled with frustration.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to the Queers of Time podcast.
I'm Matt.
I'm James.
I'm Kemi.
And I'm Kat.
And this is a podcast to talk about all the gay stuff in the Wheel of Time.
Because we're gay and we like the Wheel of Time.
Shout out to Nikki A., our newest terrifying patron. And as always, thank you, Lurks, for being our horrifying feral venerator of Soirain.
Being a queer podcast, we'd be betraying our people if we didn't do a horror episode on Halloween. And there's no better series to talk about on Halloween than, you guessed it, The Wheel of Time. Robert Jordan could write fantasy, he could write action, but today we want to talk about arguably his strongest suit, horror writing.
So first, let's talk about our favorite spooky moments from the show, the book, or other fantasy properties, because horror isn't always associated with fantasy, and there's a lot of missed opportunity there. Kat, do you want to start us off?
Oh my gosh. So this is the thing, and we've discussed this before. I'm not a spooky gay. I'm not that kind of gay.
But we love you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It is less common in your breed of gay.
And what breed is that?
And what breed is that?
What breed is that, James? Go ahead.
So is that a gay man thing, or?
Sapphic.
Sapphic? Okay.
Sapphic Canadian.
Okay.
Is that actually a thing, that Sapphics don't like horror?
I don't know.
I don't know. I just know gays like horror
Oh, I see.
more prevalently.
Okay.
So we're going to have to turn this from Matt talking about him being canceled to Matt saying, and there's James getting canceled.
Yay!
Yeah, anyway, Kat.
Yes. So, I'm not I don't like horror. I'm a gigantic chicken. I had sleep paralysis as a kid and a teenager. It's not a good combination, and horrible nightmares.
It's like the sleep paralysis. It reminds me of The Haunting of Hill House. Have you? No, and
Yeah.
Oh, bad.
Sleep paralysis is awful.
It's terrible. It's terrible and terrifying. I thought that I was being possessed by demons for about 3 years, and church did not help. So,
For those of you that aren't familiar with sleep paralysis, it's a real phenomenon. Basically, your
Yes.
brain shuts down in some departments when you're sleeping. So you don't if you dream you're running, you're not going to actually get up and run. So you're essentially paralyzed when you're sleeping. Sleep paralysis is when your mind wakes up and you can open your eyes and you can see, but your body is still paralyzed, so you can't move. And it often induces fear, which can cause hallucinations. And when it happens, it's terrifying.
it is horrible. Coming from a religious background as well, anything off was immediately like demons. And so I legitimately thought that I was possessed for a few years as a teenager. And so horror movies was something that I kind of stayed away from because I had really, really bad nightmares. But I will say, I love the way that Robert Jordan writes horror. He does it, I think, so I'm a fan of impending doom. And so that sort of feeling like you know something is building, you know something is coming, but you don't know exactly when it's going to drop and when it's going to hit. And then when it does, it's really, really satisfying. And so the moment that I really like from Wheel of Time was, and I'm reluctant to say this name because I feel like just saying the name is going to summon the Twitter thread, and it's going to automatically add me to the thread on Twitter. And I do not want that. I can't stress that enough. My Twitter is chaotic enough. Hinterstep.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially like Groundhog Day from hell.
I keep thinking it's Industrap and that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Hinder strap on.
Yeah, I just realized it's...
Hinder strap on. Yeah.
I thought it was hinder strap the entire time.
It's hinder stop.
No, it's hinder stap.
Why have I been calling it hinder strap?
Because it sounds better.
Strap-ons.
I know, it does.
We know, Matt, you already said strap on 5 times. We heard you the first time.
No.
Yeah, but no one acknowledged it.
I said it twice. Thank you.
Yes, but I'm doing the post-production, so if I want to just copy-paste your strap on 5 times, I can.
Oh, that'll sound weird.
Please do that. Strap on, strap on, strap on, strap on, strap on.
Anyway.
So why do you find hinder stap so terrifying?
I feel like I think there's the horrifying part for me anyway is just having your choices and your will taken away. So you have no control over your body, you have no control over what you're doing, but they're left with this they're left with dreams and nightmares basically. Like they're aware on some level of what's happening, but they're not able to ever get out of it. And that to me, not being able to escape it, what a horrifying existence. They could go I think it says they could go however many towns over, or they could try and escape, but they would still wake up in their bed. They would still keep coming back. And that's I think losing control of you is a really terrifying idea. And I think that Robert Jordan does a really good job at portraying that and just portraying, again, the impending horror of it, the impending doom of just the build up to it. And then when it hits, it's just oh shit.
Yeah.
What? This is terrible.
What I love about Interstab is also how it's used in the last battle.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's used at some point, but I just, the first time I read it, I just did not understand at all what was happening. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, that's what was happening.
Yeah.
Fun.
That was really cool.
Yeah, it's, basically Groundhog Day from hell. The worst kind of Groundhog Day you can imagine. Where just you go and brutally murder your friends and your loved ones, and then you have to wake up and do it all over again, and you have a vague sort of inclination of what you've done every time. That's, I don't even know that you can even recover from that trauma. It's terrifying. But it's also it's not super, I like that Jordan doesn't do things super, super graphic or overly graphic, where there's enough to it to be genuinely scary, but it's written in a way that's you kind of don't even notice it almost. You know what I mean? It's just oh, this is really, and it's, I think this is really where he thrives and excels. It's just writing this sort of suspense and this sort of horror and this sort of building up to things. I really, really like that. And I just, I love that. It's terrifying as it is. It works really, really well, I think.
It does, yeah. Camille, what about you? What's your favorite, or what scenes stick out to you from either the show, the books, or other fantasies?
So I'm also not much of a spooky gay. During that conversation, that kind of make me realize as two things, in a sense that when I'm reading, I'm usually not visualizing anything, which means that reading some horror-related passages are easier to me because I don't catch some of the horror, so I don't have the opportunity to freak out about it. But I know watching TV shows or movies with horror stuff is something that you're gonna need to give me a pretty good motivation to do that, which means there's gonna need to be some gays in there. Otherwise, I'm not going to watch it. I watched The Haunting of Hill House, and that was really because a friend asked me to watch it, and there's some gays in there, and they don't die. The Haunting of Hill House is actually a novel that was very interesting because it's a bunch of horror elements, but at the end of it, you realize what is happening, and it gives a motivation to all the horror elements that is actually... it's about grief and it's relatable and make it kind of sad, which change a bit the mindset you have while watching the horror part. But yeah, so when reading horror, I do think that the ways are especially creepy. I liked what they did in the TV show because the book describes the ways at a place so dark you don't see shit a meter away from where you are, which in a TV show is a very bad thing to have to show because you cannot just show a black screen.
Yes.
You cannot be Game of Thrones on their last season and just have everything dark and nobody can see shit unless like you change your TV setup. Yeah, I do think they managed to do that well. I also like the dreams.
Oh, yeah.
The dreams in the first book are not very spooky because it's just like Balden being a freak and like breaking some rat's back and thinking it's going to be a great way to motivate boys to follow him. The show managed to do something that is pretty nice. When Rand is coughing his bat, and you're like, is that a COVID jokes? Oh no, that was filmed before. Or even like Perrin, the dream that Perrin has, where you see again the wife that he killed.
Yeah.
Yeah, when she turns to him with her like eyes milky, that's really creepy. So, James, you're scared of the giant dicks, right? In the Blight Dicks.
Before we get to that, thank you. Before we get to that, and honestly, you know what? That might be the title of the episode. You're scared of the giant dicks, right?
The Blight Dicks.
The Blight Dicks. Oh, God.
Anyway, I just wanted to say Hinderstap was entirely Sanderson.
Really?
Really? Interesting.
Harriet said to do something scary at the end because it was the end of the world and to come up with some really cool bubbles of evil. Here are some examples of what Robert Jordan came up with. Be weird and freaky. And then he made up the entire thing.
Wow.
So
okay.
Wow.
Kudos to Brandon Sanderson, who I do not associate with scary writing.
Yeah. Good for him. That's awesome. I feel bad now. I should have done more research into this.
It's okay. You know, it's from the Wheel of Time, and I said the books, the show, or other fantasy properties. Therefore, your answer is correct. Before any reply guys come into the comments to yell at Kat. Don't yell at Kat. I will hurt you.
It's still Wheel of Time. We aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah. I find the Blight Dicks terrifying.
I had forgotten about the Blight Dicks.
Me too, honestly.
Agenor is probably my favorite of all of the Forsaken, just because
I quickly forget about Dicks.
Same.
There's another title of the episode. I quickly forget about dicks.
I mean, I haven't gotten a lot of episode titles so far, so...
You haven't gotten a single one, yeah. Okay. No, I think Agenor is my favorite Forsaken just because of how, like, fucked up and twisted he is. Like, he did things just to do them. Just to see what kind of, like, Frankenstein bullshit he could create. And the Jumara, which are the worms in the Eye of the World, are only mentioned pretty much once, I think, in the Eye of the World when they're like running away from them in the Blight, trying to reach the Green Man and everything. And that scene, I remember reading that scene and it being like super terrifying to me because, yeah, they're obviously going to make it because there's the good guys, but Lan was afraid of the Jumara. Like, Lan, who has done everything and isn't afraid of like Murdral or Trollocs. Like, he can take them, he might die, but he's not afraid of them.
Right.
He is afraid of the Jumara.
Yep.
And then in River of Souls, we see, which is, for those that don't know, in Unfettered. I think it was Unfettered. It might have been Unfettered 3. No, it was Unfettered. It was regular Unfettered, which is an anthology. We see Demandred in Shara going to get the Sawing All that he uses, and he has to battle a full-grown Jumara. And he is terrified of it. And he says that if he didn't know, like, he's the greatest swordsman in the world, like, pretty much Lan, we get it. But, and if he didn't know exactly how to kill it, he wouldn't have survived. Like, he said that himself.
Yeah.
And it's described as, like, super terrifying.
I actually haven't read Rivers of Soul.
Oh my god, this one's I don't care about the Perrin one, where he's, like, sealing up the ways and stuff. I don't care about that. This one is amazing. All right, so the Jumara, they have an unintended... I don't know if it was intended or not, but you can't use the one power against them or they get stronger.
Oh.
So you have to battle them with, like, blades. So in River of Souls, it says, bow channeled, releasing a blast of fire at the vine. The fire hit, but it had an unexpected effect. Where the web touched the vine, more sprouted out. The room started to shake. And then later, he knew now what he faced. Somehow, a juvenile Jumara must have crawled through this cavern and gone straight through its pupation and transformation. The resulting shadow spawn was too large to squeeze back out. He saw only its mouth and some of its tendrils and spines. Jumara strengthened when the one power was used against them. Agonor, I hope you burn wherever you are, Bao thought. He had always hated these creatures. And then he uses, weaves to lift rocks and, crush the Jumara. And it's just a really cool scene, imagining what the Jumara looks like. Tendrils and spikes everywhere.
Yeah.
I just think it's super terrifying.
It does sound like creepy.
It's a very specific niche thing, but that's me.
No, after this episode airs, more people will know about the Jumara, and you'll have spread the gospel of the Blight Dicks to our lovely listeners.
The gospel of the Blight Dicks. That could also be another title.
I was going to say, we have so many good episode titles. Thank you, Jumara.
That's a good title. Damn, that's good.
Okay. So for me, I would have to say, and this is the popular answer, The Ways is probably the best horror writing that Robert Jordan did, but I'll talk about that more in detail a bit later. But as far as the show goes, I think that the slow buildup in the first episode of seeing these bodies, seeing the sheep arranged in a bloody pile, and all that slow building suspense and the storms, just all of it leading up to the Trolloc attack, and then the Trolloc attack happening and the gore that followed, I think that was just fantastic, spooky writing. So that's probably, for me, the best example of horror from the show.
Yeah.
And with the books, I have, The Ways. Before we go to Professor Frank and Matt's Hierarchy of Fear lecture, does anybody have anything else about?
Yeah, I feel like I was thinking about the show and the first few episodes of the show. Shadar Logoff was pretty nice too.
Yeah.
I feel like it deserves a mention in itself. And
yes.
So what was very well done with Shadar Logoff, in my opinion, I like how the build-up is also put with the music. Because when you see the music, it keeps going up, and then it's slowed down, and then it ups, and it's so well done. And the music of Shadar Logoff when they're running from Mashadar, it's I've listened to that specific soundtrack a lot because there's a very good violin there and amazing.
The music on the show in general, it's really, I honestly think the music is one of the best things about the show. I think they did a really good job at setting it apart. It still sounds very much like fantasy, but it definitely has that horror vibe, I think, to it. That sort of suspenseful vibe that really sets Wheel of Time apart, I think, with fantasy. And it's, I completely agree with you, Camille. Shadar Logoff was really, really well done.
It's definitely fantasy, but it's not Lord of the Rings fantasy at all. And I love that.
Exactly. Very different.
Shout out to Lauren Balfe.
Yes.
For real.
If you ever want to be a guest on the podcast, Lauren,
hey.
we'll have you.
Yes, we will.
He doesn't know about us. Don't worry about that.
Shh. We'll be famous one day.
Speaking of Lord of the Rings, isn't Moria pretty creepy, Cat?
It is. So, yeah. So I read Lord of the Rings when I was maybe 11 or 12. And I just remember getting to that part where Gandalf, they're in the mines, they're in the tomb, that's sort of the tomb room, and they're reading from the book that the dwarves kept, and they're the dwarves are saying, we cannot get out, drums in the deep, and all of that. And then as they're reading it, shortly after, the drums start to sound, and it's just, I really, really like that. And I just remember reading it as a kid and being like, this is really creepy.
Yeah.
I was genuinely creeped out. And again, it's that sort of feeling of impending doom, where you're just okay, I feel what's coming. This is not going to be good. And as they're reading the fates of, what happened to people who were there before, they're starting to hear these drums and realizing oh, that's what's going to happen to us. I love that whole section of just them traveling through Moria. It kind of reminds me, it has almost the same vibes as The Ways, honestly.
Oh yeah.
Where it's just like, yeah, like it's just very dark. There's just this sort of like it just feels like death, I think, all around them. And it's just this sort of dread that is this sort of lingering dread. And I mean, no matter how many times I read it, no matter how many times I watch the movies, there's still part of my brain that's like, are they going to get out of there?
Yeah.
Are they going to make it out? Are they going to be okay? And I feel like that's just good writing. It's, you know.
That scene in the movie is amazing.
It's so good.
Like with, which one? Is it? It's Peregrine too.
Perrin that knocked.
It's like knocks the baguette and the skeleton.
Oh, yes.
Full of a took.
It feels that this skeleton is falling forever.
Ever. Oh, yeah.
And after that, you have a moment of silence. And everyone gives that relieved sign. And then the first drum hits.
Yeah.
And it is, again, a moment where music matters so much.
Yeah.
Music is so important.
Absolutely.
It's so important to, like, The Shining wouldn't be nearly as creepy as it is without that really discordant score that uses a lot of, I think it's called tritone.
Okay.
Where you put different keys that don't fit together and it creates a really unsettling effect. But yeah, I'm glad we talked about Moria because I know that's a favorite with a lot of people. And it's certainly my favorite location in The Lord of the Rings. I would totally live there if I could. Me and the Balrog having tea.
Oh, wait, you mean Moria as it is?
Oh yeah, no, he doesn't mean Moria as in Rings of Power. Not with Disa. Disa's skeleton is what he's having tea with.
For a second, I was like, oh yeah, me too. And then I was like, wait a second, this is Matt that we're talking about.
Yeah, that is one of the heartbreaking things about Rings of Power is seeing Moria in its heyday.
Oh my god.
Cause of Doom, and just being like, y'all are fucked.
Yeah.
Oh, it hurt. Like I was so happy to see it. And I'm so glad that we get to see it, but also I just felt so deeply. And I mean, the same with, sorry, I'm getting on a Lord of the Rings tangent.
That's okay.
It's same with Numenor, like so much happiness. And then also like, just like, oh my God.
And then they had the fucking nerve to show her dream. And I'm like,
how very dare.
I said,
how very dare they?
This early? That's not going to happen for 2 or 3 more seasons this early.
How very dare they?
Oh no, I do want to say one more thing. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
About Wheel of Time. I find the Portal Stone scene terrifying just because it's like reliving living like every possibility.
Oh yeah.
And having to remember all of that. I think the flicker, I hate how like the flicker is all like, it's a fucking Wheel of Time meme at this point, and I hate it, but I love the scene itself because of like how psychologically traumatizing it is.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it's true.
And I just want to know what other people like saw there. Matt being so freaked out and like, I will never betray you, Ren. I will never betray you.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure Verin saw herself dying multiple times.
Oh my God. I would love to see. Oh, can you imagine what Verin would have said? Oh my God.
And Inkta, like, is that the flicker scene that made Inkta reconsider some of his decision? Or
right. Yeah. I think it was definitely part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. I call this segment, this is my dedication to Robert Jordan and the Ways, and I call this segment Professor Frank and Matt and the Hierarchy of Fear. And the Hierarchy of Fear is from a 1982, I believe, book called Dance Macabre by a guy called Stephen King.
I don't know that guy.
Who is that?
Yeah, he's...
some guy, huh?
Yeah, just some guy. But he wrote down in this book and highlighted what he called the hierarchy of scares or fear. And it's essentially 3 different ways of scaring audiences. So to quote, the gross out, the sight of a severed head tumbling down a flight of stairs. It's when the lights go out and something green and slimy splatters against your arm. Then there's the horror, the unnatural spiders, the size of bears, the dead waking up and walking around. It's when the light goes out and something with claws grabs you by the arm. And the last and the worst one is terror, when you come home and notice everything you own has been taken away and replaced by an exact substitute. It's when the lights go out and you feel something behind you. You hear it, you feel its breath against your ear, but when you turn around, there's nothing there. So,
full body shiver.
This is a very important thing that, to me, any writer of horror has to master, and Robert Jordan mastered it. You want the most of terror because it's the most visceral one, and it's that building of suspense. And then you from the terror you go into horror, and then you only use the gross out as either a last resort or sort of a condiment. Because think of shows, if you've ever seen like a slasher film that's just so gory, you're like, okay, well this is gross, but it's not that scary. And that's why, because they're just doing the gross out. But every element really has to be done perfectly and in a certain sort of ratio. And that's why Robert Jordan is on my list of excellent horror writers. And sadly, I don't think he's a horror author because he never really wrote a full horror novel. And I'm sad about that, because the potential that we had for a Robert Jordan horror novel, it's something I will always be sad about. But just to illustrate why Robert Jordan is one of the best horror writers, I'm going to read some quotes from the chapters 44 and 45 from The Eye of the World, which illustrates how Robert Jordan used terror, horror, and the gross out. So, with terror, I quote, "Abruptly the chill burst like a bubble, and Rand paused to catch his breath. He was inside the ways. Just ahead, Lan and Loyal waited patiently by their horses. All around them was blackness that seemed to stretch on forever. Their lanterns made a small pool of light around them, too small, as if something pressed back the light, or ate it. It was as if the dark became denser, and the more light there was, thickening as it fought against being diminished." So here you can see the idea that things aren't quite as they seem. It's not just darkness, it's a darkness that is almost alive. But you don't see anything, not quite yet. It's just an emotional sense of something very wrong. And then we move on in the next chapter to horror. At the foot of one of the bridges, the frozen shapes of Trollocs reared, caught flailing about them with hooked axes and scythe-like swords. Gray and pitted like the stone, the huge bodies were half sunken in the swollen, bubbled surface. Some of the bubbles had burst, revealing more snouted faces, forever snarling with fear. Rand heard someone retching behind him and swallowed hard to keep from joining whoever it was. Even for Trollocs, it had been a horrible way to die. So notice that we don't actually get any gore here. We see the after effects of something really unnatural. And at this point, we already know Trollocs are really scary.
Question. Who do you think was throwing up?
Oh, who do I think was throwing up? It was Matt.
That's a good question.
It was that weak bitch.
Oh, I was going to say Perrin. Perrin has a weak stomach at this point.
Okay.
Like he threw up at Dumasdale.
Okay, that's true.
We can go with Perrin. Yeah, Perrin's the punk. But yeah, so you see, at this point we know how scary Trollocs are, and we see the leftovers of what happened to them, and we know that whatever's in here is really bad. And then shortly after that, RJ wraps it up and uses both horror and fear, and I quote, "Later, there was a distant wind too, off in the black somewhere. Rand could not say in which direction. At first he thought it was his imagination, but with time he became sure. He thought, it'll be good to feel the wind again, even if it's cold. Suddenly he blinked. Loyal, didn't you say there isn't any wind in the ways?" And that's when the horror of the scene really breaks out, and Robert Jordan does give us a gross out, but he doesn't overdo it. As Machin Sin, the Black Wind, envelops our characters, we hear their thoughts. The voices seem to whisper in Rand's ear, right at the brink of understanding and within it. Flesh so fine to tear, to gash the skin to strip, to plate, so nice to plate the strips, so nice, so red the drops that fall, blood so red, so sweet. Sweet screams, pretty screams, singing screams, scream your song, sing your screams. And that's pretty nasty.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I call a gross out. We don't necessarily see it, but it's the descriptive thing. It puts a body horror type of image into your minds. So I guess the point of all this is my little tribute to Robert Jordan and how masterfully he wove these three elements of terror, horror, and then the gross out just a little bit, and how just horrendous that scene really was. And I almost think that chapters 44 and 45 read as a self-contained horror story. If I were to be teaching a class on horror writing, I would include these chapters along with Shirley Jackson, Stephen King, and many others as good examples. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's, I mean, as you were reading it, especially that where Rand, Rand has that realization of like, I thought there was no wind in the ways. And just like, that's where like the shoe drops, and it's just like, oh God, that's right. Because like, I remember thinking when I read that, like, oh my God, that's right. Loyal did say that. Wait, uh-oh. And just like, like that, just that like realization, like, oh God, okay, they're in trouble. This is bad.
But it's very powerful because we've been waiting for the shoe to drop. Because everything that happens before, it just, okay, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I just think the gross out part of like what Machin Shin says is just disgusting, and that I can deal with terror and horror aspects of it, but the gross out, like I don't do physical, like bloody, at least if it looks real. If it's obviously fake, I don't care. But for the stuff that like body horror, I don't do super well, and this is very close to body horror type of stuff.
Yeah.
It's describing body horror.
Yeah.
And I think the show deviated, I'm not saying that in a bad way, because
it adapted.
Well, the themes that they were exploring were different. So turning Machin Shin from this body horror type of damned wind, it becomes more of a cosmic horror, existential type of thing. So we're lacking that body horror, that gross out element within the ways, but I think it works. If I were to put up book ways versus show ways scene, I think I would prefer the book ways, but I think that the show ways was done as best as I could have ever hoped for and expected, and I'm really happy with how they did it.
Yeah, so something that I wanted to mention, because you said that their intent was a bit different with the ways versus the books and the show. And one thing that is also a very noticeable difference is that in the books, the ways is kind of the first time they're back all together, because they all meet each other in Camlin and they leave pretty quickly after that. So you start on a different vibe already compared to the show, where they had to adapt for Barneris leaving, so Matt is gone. So there's already some tension between the characters as they get into the ways.
Yeah.
Do you think that if they hadn't had to get rid of Matt, do you think the ways would have been filmed in a very different mindset for the show?
I don't think so. And here's why. I think the horror of the ways is in the books, it's in large part psychological. And there is a way to adapt the ways in a quote unquote very faithful way, but it wouldn't fit with the tone of the show, because books, you could write a short story in which a man is sitting on a park bench and he doesn't move at all, but it could be the most horrifying story ever because he could be slowly losing his mind and hallucinating things. You couldn't film that unless you somehow filmed his hallucinations. So TV and movies are a much more visual medium, which is why we didn't have that black space in the ways. We had the crumbling towers and bridges in the midst. I think if they had added, or if Matt had been there, I would have loved it, because we could have gotten that additional wind speaking to him, and I would have loved to have heard what he would have heard in the ways with that specific Machin Shin.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it needed to also serve the purpose of like, I think the way they changed it, it served a very good purpose in the show, and I'm curious to see if they visit it again and they see Machin Shin, like how it's going to shake out.
Oh, I had not thought about that, but that's true that we do get back to the ways quite a few times, and that could reveal, because it's the wind of intrusive thoughts. Mean Girl Nanobot, is that how you call that, James?
I like Mean Girl Nanobot.
Mean Girl Nanobots.
I love that.
I think it's a cool way to reveal some of the uncertainties character may have, but not physically show to others.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's horrifying in its own way.
Yes. I think it really got down to the core of all of the characters, with the exception of Matt. I think it really got down to the core of what kind of makes them tick and what they're like, I think for the show anyway, what's going to be their motivation going forward. Like it really did just get right at the heart of it, which is the point. Like those are intrusive thoughts. And I just think it worked really, really well. It's different for sure from the ways in the book. But I like you said, Matt, I think I'm happy with the change that they made because I think it does fit better overall with the tone of the show. And I would not be surprised to see some of those intrusive thoughts coming, like those being thread back into future seasons and future episodes.
Yeah, it really is the perfect example of how to adapt something and not stick strictly to the books, but do it in a way that enhances what the books convey in a fast manner. And the ways are excellent. So do you have any other comments about any other bouts of horror in the Wheel of Time show or book?
Oh, I don't know if this counts as horror, but that moment where we found out that Dana was a dark friend was like, again, like just that switch from like, oh, is it the way that like when she says that, and just like the tone instantly changes and the music changes. And I was just like, oh, this is really good. Like, it's just that, like, it honestly gave me full body shivers the first time. I just remember watching that and being like, oh, that was really well done.
It's really creepy.
It was really creepy. We're just like, she just like flipped like just instantly flipped.
So it's funny because I don't think I would consider that as horror, but at the same time, it's really a moment where you realize you cannot trust anyone. And that's a very scary thing to realize.
Yes.
I mean, I think it was horror when she was like chasing after them. Like that entire, I mean, any kind of chase scenes freak me out a little bit, but that might just be me.
I would consider it to be psychological suspense, which is horror adjacent. Anything that makes you feel like that very specific stomach drop, I think is fair game to be argued horror. And again, there's different types of horror. So it's certainly not like slasher horror or cosmic horror, but I would call it, if anything, psychological horror, because you realize that something very wrong is happening and it's very dangerous for you.
Yeah.
So
the place of safety is not a place of safety anymore.
No. And those types of realizations can play into a lot of horror tropes if they're well done, which that scene was so well done. And Dana.
Oh, yeah.
We've got to bring Dana back. Like, Rafe.
I want them to find a way. Can they find a way to bring that actress back? Because she was fantastic.
Yeah. I don't need it to be Dana. I would love it if it were Dana, but she clearly, died. But
yeah,
maybe in the unseen world, maybe in Teller and Riyadh, but also just bring the actress back.
Yeah, bring her back.
And say nothing.
In the TV show Chucky, Devon Sawa, who's one of my favorite actors, he
follows you on Twitter.
He does follow me. I was going to mention that. I was like, no, I'm not going to mention that. But anyways, he plays two twins in the Chucky TV show, and they both die. And he is returning to Chucky season 2 as a priest. And he just looks exactly the same.
I love it.
It's very much an American Horror Story thing.
It is. But no, they're continuing the story from season 1. So the characters from season 1 are going into season 2.
Yeah.
And yet Devon Sawa was going to be there as a totally different character. And I'm interested to see
I love it.
If the main character's like, you're my uncle, but he's dead. Or if they're just going to play it off like he's a completely different person. I don't know.
Yeah.
Are y'all ready for a game?
I am very ready for a game.
Ready for a game. Okay, so one of the reasons I asked y'all for your scariest moments from the show or the books is because I wanted to exploit your weaknesses.
Oh, no.
I wanted to put you in that dark place. It's going to be How to Survive a Horror Movie, Wheel of Time edition.
The answer is you don't.
No, there are final girls and some final boys, depending on the movie, and some final days.
Okay.
So you're going to be the final days of this scenario. And each of you is going to be put into a situation, and I would like you to briefly explain how you end up surviving. And you cannot say, I roll over and die. You have to survive this horror encounter.
Do you want to explain what final girls are for people that don't know?
Okay, final girls and final boys in horror is mostly in slasher films, and it's the person who ends up surviving. So Sidney Prescott from Scream, Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween. A final boy would be I forgot the two men. There's two of them in Deep Blue Sea, that corny shark horror flick.
Oh yeah, LL Cool J and the Shark Wrangler.
Yeah, LL Cool J and the Shark Wrangler. They count as final boys or final men or whatever. Okay, so first up is Kat.
Uh-oh.
You find yourself in Hinterstop. How do you survive?
I'm not a resident of the town. I just find myself there, right?
You find yourself there like Matt and his merry band do before the last battle.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you find yourself there, then you're a resident there.
Exactly. That's why I asked. I just want to double check.
You're already doomed.
Exactly. That would make it very easy for me. I would already be fucked. How would I survive? Okay. I would make armor for myself somehow. I don't know how exactly. I would make armor. I would find some wood or scraps of metal maybe. Or no, I would steal some armor. There's got to be armor there. I would steal some armor, cover my entire body in armor, and then I think I feel like I would be the kind of...
And then you cannot move anymore because it's too heavy and you're not used to it?
No. I would... Okay, what would I do? I was going to say I would build like some kind of, I don't know what to call it, like a place of safety for myself.
Just leave the town.
Can I leave?
No.
I don't think you can leave.
If you survive till morning, you're not wrapped into the curse.
Then I'm not wrapped into the curse. Okay. So, yes, I would build a fortress for myself. A small little fortress. A cat-sized fortress. And I would make... So I would do like... I don't know if you've seen The Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm.
I would do like they do. Yeah. So I would do like lots of pointy sticks. I would like shave off the ends of like big like sticks and stuff like that. I would put them out front. I would just like barricade myself inside. And then I would make Molotov cocktails.
Ooh.
I would make Molotov cocktails ahead of time, and anytime someone came too close, Molotov cocktail.
So are you saying that you go to Interstab on purpose with all that equipment you need in order to survive the whole night?
No,
they're just dumped in, and they are doing this on their own ingenuity.
Yeah, I would find some art. If I couldn't find armor, if I couldn't find something that could protect my body, I would steal it.
I'm sure Molotov cocktail are easy to make.
Yeah, I would steal it. I would find some weapons. I would steal those if necessary. And then I would make a shelter for myself.
Excellent.
And I would make Molotov cocktails. And Molotov cocktails, that's easy. You just need alcohol and fire.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
I think that sounds like a perfectly reasonable way to survive. So Kat survives Hinterstop for the night and escapes.
Yay.
James, you are in the Blight, and a giant Blight Dick comes after you, and you cannot go down on it. How do you survive?
I wouldn't go... I just really don't like you. I would likely die. Like, Lan is afraid of these things. Okay, I would just try and think about the Green Man and how much I need that. Because that is the only way that you can really get into the Green Man's sanctuary. If this is after the Green Man's dead, then I'm fucked. But really thinking about the Green Man, I guess, and how much like I wanted to be somewhere else and somewhere safe. Maybe he would hear my plea, Someshta, and he would help me.
You know, I'm going to take that.
Because you can't, like, they're super fast. Like, I'm a slow bitch. It's not happening. I don't want to give up, but at the same time, like, it's Lan that's afraid of these things.
Yeah.
I ain't got nothing.
You know, I'm going to take that because it's a pretty, it's a lot of ingenuity. You know, a lot of people would try to fight or try to hide. And if they tried to fight, they would die. If they tried to hide, they'd probably get found by something else. So that's a good answer.
Yeah, I was thinking like hide in the tree and then die.
But the tree eats you.
But the tree eats me. Exactly.
Okay. So I'm gonna, as the horror DM, I'm gonna say that, you know, the Green Man does take pity on you, and that's how you survive the Blight Dick. Okay, Camille, you get. Do I give you the Ways or do I give you Hill House?
Oh, give me Hill House.
I'm gonna give you Hill House.
He's like, Hill House, please.
Gosh, I feel like I should rewatch The Haunting of Hill House. It's such a good TV show. Like, there's a book, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't read the book. The TV show is so well done. Shit, I cannot say I would die. Because the Hill House is scary in a sense that it has some sort of psychological power on you. Like, I don't remember any of the characters' name, but like the girl would just end up killing herself. She had no intention really of killing herself, but like she was just hallucinating.
Eleanor.
No, isn't that the mother?
Could be the mother.
I'm talking about the youngest daughter, one of the twin.
That's Eleanor.
Yeah, it's shit. How does a gay one survive again?
Theo? I forgot how Theo survives. I think she survives by being gay.
Yeah, so they don't kill the gay in that TV show, which is pretty rare. But like, okay, have you seen the series that they actually never left?
I did, and I don't buy it.
It's I honestly I don't know, because it's the smartest way just to get the hell away of that house. And the thing is that the longer you stay in that house, the more power it has on you. And also, don't try to burn the house, because it makes the house angry. Angry and hungry, both.
So Camille would analyze their way out of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing you can do. It's try to be smarter than whatever is trying to kill you. But I probably would end up going back to, save my stupid siblings.
Do you need to, though?
Yes. Yes, because I am also damn gay who would do anything for their siblings. So,
Aww.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. I'll go ahead and accept that, because it's been a while since I've watched the TV show.
Me too. I don't remember much of it. I just remember that the ghosts are so well done.
Okay, well, I am not going to do one for myself. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up by giving us and our lovely listeners some horror recommendations, specifically queer horror recommendations. And as you are all listening to this on Halloween or shortly thereafter, I thought it'd be cool to give you winter horror, because winter is a great time for spooky tales. So, my first recommendation for y'all is All the White Spaces by Allie Wilkes. It's an Antarctica horror story featuring a trans protagonist who is seeking adventure after his brothers die in World War I. And there's a lot of, it's almost cosmic horror, but a lot of psychological horror. And one of the best things about All the White Spaces is that the trans character's trauma is not at all wrapped up in their trans identity. There's also a gay character, and minor spoiler alert, the gay character and the trans character are among the survivors of the novel.
Nice.
So there will no be bury your trans characters. And it's very atmospheric. And if you're looking for a trans hero whose trauma is not dependent on their transness, it's fantastic. The second one is a shorter novel. It's called Dark Matter by Michelle Paver. And it's about a man going to the northernmost island in Norway, so close to the Arctic Circle, opposite side of the globe from Antarctica. And he goes on a scientific expedition with the crew, and due to circumstances beyond their control, he ends up alone in the dark months. And something is out there walking the lonely white blasted areas while he's alone in the cabin. And he's gay. It's mentioned very briefly, but the novel is from his POV, and there are no barrier gays in this. And the last one, which isn't necessarily a winter horror story, but because Camille mentioned it, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson is the best haunted house story in American literature, I think. if you go into it expecting a lot of body horror, you're not going to get it. It is first and foremost psychological horror. There's a lot of gaslighting, like supernatural gaslighting, like, is this real or is it not real? Is this person doing this to themselves as a cry for help, or is there something really dark in this house? It's a short read, and Theo, as you may remember from the show, is very gay in the show. I would call her vaguely sapphic in the novel. It's pretty clear that she's not heterosexual, and she does survive the novel. So there are no bury or gays, at least as far as Theo is concerned, in The Haunting of Hill House. So there you have it. All the White Spaces, Dark Matter, and The Haunting of Hill House. 3 queer horror novels in which the queer characters do not suffer. And that's all I have.
Well, they do suffer, but they don't.
Okay, yeah. They don't die. They don't die, and they're suffering.
They leave the novel with a lot of trauma, but they do not die.
and they are not traumatized because they are queer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thank you, Professor Matt. I always like hearing you talk about horror. It makes me so happy. I said this before on Twitter earlier today, and just like, I love seeing my friends talk about the things that they love. It just makes me so happy. And this is like a combination of 2 things that you love. Wheel of Time and horror. The perfect combo. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Queers of Time podcast. If you liked our show, please give us a review on Apple Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Queers of Time and our Discord server. If you're able, we'd love to have your support through Patreon. We've got a lot of nice benefits there, and this really helps us cover the costs of producing the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening. This was Queers of Time, a Wheel of Time podcast. The music is Dance of the Witches by Julius H.